Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's a pleasure to rise on behalf of the good people of Okanagan Lake West, South Kelowna, and the beautiful interior of British Columbia. C-15 is an omnibus piece of legislation, and the Liberals, in their various forms of government, the Trudeau era, now followed by the new Prime Minister, have staked out that the omnibus is a perfectly legitimate piece of legislation where they throw essentially everything, including the kitchen sink, in there. But you know what happens, Mr. Speaker, when you throw in the kitchen sink? It means you can't keep your hands clean anymore. And one of the problems that we have in this particular bill is around the HSR Act, or the High Speed Rail Act, where the government, in an effort to be able to get in front of an announcement, to be able to say, look at us, look at all the great things we're doing, we'll have a project, very scant details, Mr. Speaker, first announced by the previous Prime Minister and then re-announced by the government and then cited to be part of their Building Canada legislation C-5, which, by the way, Mr. Speaker, they still haven't gotten around to putting and designating it formally under the Act as required by law. But again, Mr. Speaker, this is a process of where they simply say, look at us, look at how great it is, and then they throw the implementation, in this case, not just to the bureaucracy, but in particular to Alto, a Crown corporation, as well as a private component that goes with it. And essentially, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the designation of a line, they have had a very short process for communities that will see this line, if it's ever finally created, separate their towns, their streets, and as we've heard from the previous member, their ability to access things like health care. So these are important conversations and not to be taken lightly. In fact, property rights, something that Conservatives believe in, stand for, we believe there should be a firm rule of law when it comes to how property rights are standardized. And obviously, it's not common law solely. There is the Expropriation Act, but that is a long-standing act that decides how government should best proceed to work with property owners to be able to have certainty, to be able to treat them with respect, to actually give them an independent process for them to contest when expropriation happens. But the government, in its attempt to be the hero, is simply throwing all of the messiness to Alto by essentially in C-15 abridging those property rights, the normal, usual process, Mr. Speaker, that would be followed through the Expropriation Act. And when the minister, came to committee, I asked him specifically, I said, Minister, you give this power to Alto, and you are essentially freezing people's property. And he says, well, no, it's not like that. But Mr. Speaker, imagine if you're a farmer and you're just about to sell. You're near the end of your long career and you want to be able to sell at a firm price, and then suddenly you're told you cannot make improvements. You're told that that your land is essentially frozen. So if you were about to sell your farm lot to your neighbor who you've known for many years, and suddenly the neighbor says, I have zero ability to predict whether or not I will be able to use the land in the fashion that I plan for my model, Mr. Speaker, that simply drives the value of that property down. And who would blame that neighbor? Or who would blame someone else wanting to come in, Mr. Speaker? Now, it even is so draconian, and what they're calling for is they actually can say no new improvements. So, Mr. Speaker, while you're going through this process, you're given very short notice. You're being told that you can't make improvements to your property, and you're trying to attempt a sale. And I said to the minister and committee, that is not fair. But again, the minister simply said, well, this will all be ironed out through that process. And I should even take a step back. We challenged the minister to look at an accelerated CTA review that would allow not just the project to proceed with timeliness, but also to have a process where communities can formally submit their thoughts. Instead, Alto is running a consultation process, and Mr. Chair, it is not the same as an independent tribunal, such as the CTA, that can review all the evidence and make a determination of where the line should go. And speaking of where the line should go, there are going to be cases where properties will have a crossing, and there'll be many properties that won't. And as we've heard from previous members, you know, to suddenly find that the most direct path that you've taken for 20 years as a property owner to get to your hospital, to suddenly find out that that will be closed and there will be no under or overpass that will allow you quick access, that has a tremendous effect on people who need to make life decisions, like being close to health care. That also means routes are going to be slowed down, so an ambulance ride that would take 10 to 15 minutes might take over an hour now. And these are things that are going to be decided by Alto, not by a tribunal that hears the evidence that says what's reasonable given the stated goal of the project and given the community's very valid concerns. Instead, the C-15 just wipes all of that out. And we offered the minister that. The minister, just like with all these things, Mr. Speaker, gave a tin ear. He's essentially giving the keys to the castle to Alto and letting those communities fall into the moat. It's simply, Mr. Speaker, the worst way to run a procurement. Now, are there some reasonable amendments that have been brought up at report stage? I'm happy to say that there are. The idea that if a property owner is frozen and maybe they have a barn or a hen house that burns down, or that a water or flood event happens, they should be able to restore that property. That is a simple courtesy to the people that are there. But I also will say that I have some tremendous concerns, because we always talk about the front end of an expropriation and the frozen process, but Mr. Speaker, there's also the back end. Because I will tell you, in every single procurement that the federal government goes through, the member from Mirabel, member of the Bloc Québécois, in this House, reminded us that the federal government does not always do as it says it will do. And in fact, you can have it where they'll expropriate your land or freeze your land, but then never use it. And there's nothing in C-15 that protects these things. So, Mr. Speaker, we have a process set up by the government that essentially allows them to play the hero and Alto to play the villain. We have now where essentially Alto has been given run of the road, where they can literally run over communities, separate communities, go over traditional roads and infrastructure and separate communities in a way without even having to say, we will fix this, we will build an overpass. There's no process for that. Alto gets to decide. There's no independent tribunal that can be appealed to. So there's that, Mr. Speaker. And again, freezing someone's assets on short notice, that's totally waiving many of the protections found in the Expropriation Act. I think, Mr. Chair, that when the government says that we want to exempt from long-standing law so that we can give the insiders of Alto the ultimate authority, I think that this government has overreached, and Conservatives will not support that type of process. Therefore, we will be looking to support reasonable amendments that start to take into account and to pull some of that power back to the property owners, because these property owners are worried, they're concerned, and so far, these consultation processes are consultation in name only. They are not meaningful, and they are not assuring the communities. As the previous member stated from Northumberland, information is what gives people certainty. And unfortunately, through this particular bill, C-15, the government has put no onus on Alto to do such that. So, Mr. Speaker, again, Conservatives support those affected property owners. We feel that the government has not looked out of their interests, but if not the Liberals, the Conservatives will.
Questions et commentaires. Questions and comments. L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing and Infrastructure. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Once again, we see the opposition members engaging in fear-mongering about the high-speed train.
It's going to be a generational project that's going to bring a lot of very positive economic benefits to all regions between Quebec and Peterborough, where it's going to be. And yet, le député de l'opposition...
The member across the way knows full well that the laws were changed in 1985. Now, there have to be consultations and social license. Yet, today, like every other day, they're trying to scare people and they're engaging in obstruction. Mr. Speaker, if the Conservative member is really here for his constituents, will he support C-15?
From Okanagan, Lake West, South Kelowna.
Monsieur le Président, c'est...
Mr. Speaker, it is totally false.
Salute here. They hold all the cards. They decide the consultation. There is nothing in here that actually requires them to do what we had originally asked the minister, to have an accelerated CTA process where communities could be heard and an independent tribunal could come down and weigh down on where the public interest is and where the private interest is, and to make it so that it is fair. For this member to be saying that's fear-mongering, no, that's called suggestion-making. That's called a win-win. And unfortunately, by taking the side of Alto, and ultimately all the authority has been given...
And I have to interrupt the member to continue. Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Joliette.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Joliette-Menawan. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for the speech. Last week, I attended an Alto event in Berthierville. Many farmers of the Lanaudière region were gathered. They are very worried. Here's my question. What does he feel is necessary in C-15 in the rights that are being taken away from those whose land is expropriated? What in C-15 is not acceptable? What should we do to have more respect for those who would be affected?
Lake West, South Kelowna.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Speaker, as I said, it is necessary and very important for the Parliament to decide if Alto has the best process. It's a company, not a court, an independent court, such as the Canadian Transportation Agency.
C'est donné.
We need to give affected communities certainty. We also need to give that certainty to property owners who are now very worried. I appreciate the Bloc Québécois' suggestion. I appreciate suggestions made by other members of Parliament in order to improve that aspect, because the Transportation Minister does not agree with us.
Questions et commentaires. The honourable gentleman from Prince Albert.
And I'd like to thank my colleague for his speech. I know he is the Shadow Minister for Transport. I'm just kind of curious, if he had $90 billion sitting in his pocket, would he be putting it into a high-speed rail, or would he be looking at places like the Port of Vancouver? Would he be looking at things like a national highway that's actually twinned? Would he be looking at other things like that if he had that kind of money? You know, if we'd been through 10 years of really good economic conditions where Canada could be self-sufficient, we'd be in a different boat, but we're not. So we are a trading nation. So if you had that kind of money, where would you place it?
The honourable member for Okanagan, Lake West, South Kelowna.
Well, I think we'd all ask the question, what would we do with $1 million? But $90 billion. Just take a moment to think about this, Mr. Speaker. $90 billion in one project, in one particular area. We could fix up the Trans-Canada Highway. We could establish northern Arctic ports. We could establish much more productive ports that would actually carry out some of the things the government says that it's all about, increasing and diversifying our trade. Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker, $90 billion, you could spend a lot of different ways. I think this House needs to consider where we should be putting our money.
Here, here.